I bought a car worth 100 grand with some old man's money just after my husband's funeral. Ashley and I were mentally and physically exhausted, yet Julia said this with glee. David was happily looking at the contract Julia had brought. Whose money are you talking about? What on earth is going on? I couldn't help but raise my voice in frustration. Despite the fact that Ashley and I were mourning the loss of my husband, our eldest son and his wife seemed not only unbothered but even pleased. The insurance money will be deposited, right? Plus, there should be an inheritance. Out of Julia's bag came, unbelievably, my husband's bank book. Seeing that, I burst into laughter. What's so funny? You're planning to use that to buy. I feel sorry for you because that bank book. My words, spoken between gasps of laughter, turned the faces of our eldest son and his wife pale. My name is Amanda Simpson. I was married to Chris and blessed with 2 children. Our eldest daughter Ashley and our eldest son David. Chris's family has been a line of doctors for generations. Both my father-in-law and mother-in-law have medical licenses. Chris had also been working hard since childhood to become a doctor. Drawn to Chris's hardworking and admirable character, which I got to know through a friend's introduction, we became a couple. Seeing Chris's dedication, our daughter Ashley also decided to pursue a career in medicine. Although Ashley wasn't necessarily academically gifted, she was diligent every day. As her mother, I was there to witness her efforts up close. I didn't force her to become a doctor. However, Chris was really pleased when she decided to become one by her own will. Mom, I got an A rating for the medical university. When she got an A rating from her dream university in high school, I couldn't help but shed tears at her success. No, it's not an acceptance yet. I still have to work hard without letting my guard down. I was genuinely happy to see her grow up to be such a kind and resilient person. But David, our eldest son, was quite the opposite. Born prematurely, David had always been frail, and I admit I might have been overprotective of him. But as David grew up, he got stronger and eventually caught up with his peers in physique. Without attending any cram school, he consistently scored perfect marks in elementary school tests. He grew up wonderfully, which was reassuring. However, the latter half of his middle school years, David started coming home with bruises every day. David, what happened to you? Those injuries. I was concerned, but David started to ignore me. They looked like bruises from fights. Maybe he got into some scuffles. He's a boy, after all. There are times like these. It's kind of a good thing in a way that he's grown up to stand up for himself. As long as he's not causing trouble for others, let him be, Chris said with a laugh. In hindsight, I should have listened to Chris and left things to some extent. However, my overprotective nature towards David made me anxious. I constantly questioned him about the fights and who hurt him, which drove him away. You're so annoying. If you ask me one more time, I'll never speak to you again. Indeed, despite Chris's advice, I kept pushing. After David's stern warning, I reflected and stopped crying. But every time one bruise healed, another appeared. All I could do was watch over him with worry. While David was certainly academically talented, he ended up spending most of his time fighting and went to a local public high school. I hoped that after he outgrew his teenage years, David would discuss his future or college plans, but he remained unchanged. Hey madam, give me some money, he demanded rudely one day. If you think acting like a delinquent makes you cool, you're gravely mistaken, Ashley retorted. Huh? What did you say? David snapped back, and it seemed like a fight was about to break out. The thought of Ashley possibly being harmed left me restless. Don't fight, please. Here, is this for lunch money? I quickly took a $50 note from my wallet and handed it to David. He clicked his tongue in annoyance and left, with Ashley glaring at him. How did it come to this? Did I spoil him too much? Every day I reflected and blamed myself. Even as his classmates began preparing for university entrance exams, David remained unchanged. Chris tried to talk to David multiple times out of concern, but David even began hurling abusive words at Chris. Well, he hasn't done anything that would involve the police, Chris would say. He has been picked up for being out late with friends more than once or twice. In the end, David neither found a job nor decided on further studies and just graduated high school. David, what are you going to do? You can do well if you study. Isn't it better to go to college now? I'm not saying you should become a doctor, but you should get a job. David wouldn't even meet my eyes when I said this. However, a year later, David, who had been jobless and staying at home, approached me. Hey, he said, I thought he might be asking for money again. But when I turned to look at him, David continued, I'm having the kid. I'm getting married. I was left speechless from the shock. David continued, but I'll start working. Can my wife and I live here? Wait, I still don't fully understand the situation. Let's discuss this with your father first. That night, Chris, David, and I had a conversation. We, as parents, came to terms with David's decision to work and his determination to welcome a child and wife. We decided to accept this new family. On the day we were to meet her, Chris, Ashley, and I waited at home. David had gone to fetch her. He's late, isn't he? I remarked. Even after the promised time of 1 o'clock, the two hadn't shown up. We worried that they might have had an accident. We tried reaching out but couldn't get in touch. Contrary to our anxiety, the two casually appeared just before 3. We're back. Wow, this place is massive. It's like a mansion. Oh, nice to meet you. I'm Julia, she said. I was taken aback by the woman David had brought home. Despite claiming to be pregnant, she wore high heels, a short skirt that seemed chilly, and had long, shimmering, pointed nails. In her hand was a plastic bag from a baby goods store, and she greeted us with surprising words. Nice to meet you. I'm David's mother. Really, you're prettier than what David described. Nice to meet you, Amanda. Her behavior lacked any semblance of manners, and I was simply stunned. Where's my room? She asked. Oh, we haven't decided yet, I replied. Okay, I'll just leave the baby stuff in the living room then. With that, Julia entered the house and headed to the living room. She then greeted Chris and Ashley with the same casual tone. The checkout line was so long. Sorry for being late. You all waited, right? Returning to the living room, Julia addressed me, Chris, Ashley, and I could only exchange glances without saying a word. Are you all nervous? Just relax, okay? Chill out. We were simply astounded by her words. We thought today was just a greeting, but Julia came in, placed a ton of luggage in the living room, and acted like she owned the place. Afterward, I greeted Julia again. She was 22 years old and apparently worked part-time at a bar. As a child, her parents divorced and she was raised by her father. However, he later disappeared, and she seems to have grown up in a children's home. I understood it must have been tough without any family, but there are kids who turn out well despite that. I don't think one's circumstances can be an excuse for rudeness. Then Ashley talked to Julia as she discussed her past. How many weeks pregnant are you now? I noticed earlier that you're wearing high heels. Your belly doesn't seem to be showing yet, but it's dangerous. I felt relieved after Ashley kindly said that. Then on Julia's behalf, David spoke up. Right, I thought the same, but Julia apparently only has heeled shoes. Buy her some, madam. Suddenly, the conversation shifted to me, and I was taken aback. Oh, don't be so surprised. You probably don't know my taste, right? If you give me money, I'll choose for myself. I was at a loss for words at Julia's lack of hesitation. Ashley shouted at the two of them. Why should Mom buy it? Why don't you, David? But the baby inside me is her grandchild, isn't it? Julia retorted. So what? It's your child? Ashley shot back. Scary. Is this what a sister-in-law is like? Hilarious, Julia said, mocking her. Ashley was furious at that remark, while Chris just kept silent, his mouth shut tight. What kind of attitude is this? She seems to be looking down on us even though we just met. However, we have to live together from now on. It wouldn't be wise to fight now. Over time, I believe her maternal instincts will grow and she'll change. When that time comes, she should naturally stop wearing heels and remove her nails. That's all I can hope for. Ashley, being a doctor, was particularly concerned about Julia's lack of parental awareness and said sharply, Anyway, make sure you earn and buy your shoes before your belly gets large. Also, remove your nails. If you can't get a pulse oximeter on, they'll forcibly remove them. With that, she stormed out of the living room and locked herself in her room. Julia seemed to be mocking Ashley, but then laughed when David said, Don't worry about her. She's just jealous because I got married before her. Then our life together began. Julia went to work but didn't help around the house. She just slept all day on her days off, using her pregnancy as an excuse. David, as he declared, started working but kept quitting after arguments and then looked for other part-time jobs. The constant job changes were quite headache-inducing, but Chris said nothing about David and Julia. It seemed he had given up on them. Then something unexpected happened. With the baby items ready and the birth of our grandchild just a month away, Chris collapsed at the hospital where he worked. Despite immediate treatment, he couldn't be saved. Even with all the challenges, I had hoped for an increase in family members. I never imagined parting with Chris before that. I was so devastated that I couldn't believe it myself, and Ashley supported me. Inspired by Ashley, I tried to act strong and managed to hold the funeral. On the morning of the funeral, I told Julia, "It's fine if you stay at home, Julia. Your belly is large and it must be hard for you." "Really? Okay, I'll stay home," she replied. In our region, it's customary not to let pregnant women attend funerals. Even without that tradition, she was about to give birth, so I said that out of concern. Julia gladly accepted my offer. It was my suggestion, and I was okay with it, but I headed to the funeral feeling a bit uneasy. David, who arrived late, seemed worried about Julia and was texting her. I did warn him once, but since the baby could come at any time, I decided to let it slide, except during the funeral. After the funeral, when I got home, I was exhausted both mentally and physically. In the living room, Ashley and I were discussing dinner in a daze. Julia came down from the second floor and handed some documents to David. "Tired, huh? Did your old man make it to heaven?" she said, laughing. David laughed as well. "Might be hell," he replied. "You guys just came back from the funeral. What are you even saying?" Ashley was furious, but I didn't have the energy to get angry anymore. "Come on, Ashley, just go with it," Julia said, pointing at the documents she had given to David. Ashley and I naturally looked at those papers. "What's that? What do you mean, go with it?" The heat of the moment left us bewildered and concerned. "I used Chris's money to buy a car worth 100 grand, Julia declared, holding up some documents. Ashley and I stared in disbelief while David looked on happily. "Whose money? What on earth are you talking about?" I raised my voice out of frustration. Chris had passed away, and while Ashley and I were grieving, the couple seemed pleased instead of saddened. "We get the insurance money, right? And there should be an inheritance," Julia said, pulling out a bank book from her bag. "Dad's bank book? Julia, did you steal it when we were out?" "That's a rude thing to say. We live together, so it's not stealing. Plus, I learned where the bank book was from David, right, David?" Julia responded defiantly. It seemed David was an accomplice. What a pitiable eldest son he was. I hadn't anticipated this at all. I looked dejectedly at the bank book in Julia's hand. Chris's name was clearly written on it, but upon a closer look, I noticed something odd. When I realized the cause of the inconsistency, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Once I started laughing, I couldn't stop. It had been a long time since I laughed so hard. Julia frowned at my uncontrollable laughter. "What's so funny? Have you lost your mind, madam?" David hurled insults at me, but I wasn't even mad anymore. All this time, I thought David was smart, but I was wrong. I felt sorry for the foolish couple. "Let's see, you wanted to buy a car, right? Have you signed the contract? Are you going to use that money? I feel sorry for you. Did you see the balance in that bank book?" Upon hearing my words, David hastily took the bank book from Julia and opened it. "What the hell? There's only $3 in here." The couple looked at the bank book in shock. Yes, that bank book was set for closure, and the balance had already been withdrawn. "This is a joke. There's supposed to be an inheritance. Where is it? And the insurance money should be deposited too." David was furious, and Julia echoed him. "Yes, there's an inheritance and insurance money. Both of my parents-in-law passed away early, and Chris had a lot of inherited and accumulated assets. Notably, Chris wasn't just a doctor, he also owned several hospitals. His total assets amounted to $1 million. However, those were assets he had built, not things he owned. Most of his assets have been donated and are now gone. The medical fees he received from patients, he wanted to use them to help other patients." "What? Didn't you know? He made a large donation, and it was in the newspapers." Hearing this, David began to tremble. He never showed interest in family matters and didn't read the newspaper, so his ignorance wasn't surprising. Moreover, the remaining money is managed in an online bank. I can't access it until we complete the inheritance procedures. Anyway, what about the insurance money? When will it be deposited? Julia rushed, grabbing the bank book and approaching me. Ashley, standing next to me, began to laugh. "Don't you know, insurance money is not deposited into the account of the deceased but to the beneficiary's account. It'll be transferred to my account and my mother's," Ashley explained, chuckling. Hearing this, Julia's bank book slipped from her hands. David looked dumbfounded, and Ashley and I exchanged glances, stifling our laughter. "What am I going to do now?" I've already signed contracts, added so many options, and they told me I can't cancel. Mom, please, just this once, lend me some money. David knelt beside the distraught Julia. It had been so long since he called me Mom that it felt unfamiliar, as if a stranger was asking for a favor. I don't know. Figure it out yourselves. I pushed him away coldly. Today, I couldn't forgive the actions of my eldest son and his wife. I'm sure Chris felt the same. Mom, you must be tired. Let's go to bed, Ashley suggested. Yes, I'm not in the mood for dinner either, I added. Ashley and I stood up, ignoring the two who were sweating in the living room, and headed to the bedroom. It seemed that during the funeral, David had been communicating with Julia about a deal. I thought they were concerned about their health, but it seemed the car was more important than their unborn child. In his lifetime, Chris always said he didn't want to leave a single penny to David and Julia. As planned, the insurance money was transferred to Ashley and me. Chris died young, and David, even after starting a family, remained unreliable. Chris had thought about what might happen after his death and even left a will. According to the will, the real estate, most of the remaining cash, and the hospital were left to me. Ashley was nominated as the successor to this hospital and bequeathed his personal investments. David was given a large piece of land in the countryside. As we opened the will and heard its contents, Julia said, "So, can't we sell the land and buy a car?" Listen to the end. I interrupted Julia and continued reading. With that land and some of the cash, take $100,000 for building the house and leave this home. What does that mean? Julia asked in confusion. We were at the probate court. The will has been validated and carries full legal force. It means exactly what it says. You get the land and money to build a house. You should be grateful, but this house should eventually belong to David, the eldest son, right? I replied, looking at Julia as if she was pleading for help. I responded with a smirk. It's what I received. I decide who to give it to. You damn old woman, better start packing your bags when you get home, huh? Julia retorted. By the way, the land that Chris designated for David was about 30 miles away in the mountains. It was indeed vast but mostly untouched woodland. No matter how large the land is, if the construction cost is $100,000, the house built on it would probably be small. I bet David and Julia, who likely had nothing, would have made a fuss about the inheritance. Whether Chris gave them the land with that in mind, I don't know, but I believe Chris created an environment where Ashley and I can live peacefully. Besides, David and Julia shouldn't even have any right to receive anything. They should be grateful for whatever they can get. A few days later, a grandchild was born. Julia's water broke in the middle of the night, and she was immediately taken to the hospital after making a call. However, due to her dropping blood pressure and the hospital being understaffed at night, Julia had to have an emergency C-section. Ashley had repeatedly told her to remove her nail extensions, but she didn't listen. Apparently, the nurse possibly removed them. No, I just got these done 3 days ago. Don't take them off, Julia. Don't move, the amniotic fluid is gushing out. They apparently had a standoff in the middle of the night. From what I heard from Ashley, this confrontation was more challenging than the surgery. I've never had fancy nails like young people do, but it seems like it was painful. It's undoubtedly a case of getting what she deserved, I thought to myself. Julia, who had been saved along with her child, could no longer stand up to Ashley and quickly became docile. She may be upset about the inheritance, but she's no longer acting superior to us. I hope she's grateful that we let her rest for the first month after childbirth, Mom, Ashley said regretfully. Can we stay here? We don't need the land or the money. No, even if you stayed here, you both only earn as much as part-time jobs and don't contribute to household expenses, I replied firmly. David's plea was met with a firm denial from both Ashley and me. Reluctantly, David went to cancel the car purchase, but he was charged a penalty fee of $10,000, which he had to pay from the $100,000 set aside for construction. Whether they were reluctant to move to the countryside or not, they considered selling the land and renting an apartment. However, the rent was too high for David and Julia's salaries, and there were no buyers for the vast woodland. They realized they had no choice but to build a house on it, as stated in the will. Desperately, they started looking for a contractor who could build a house for $90,000, but it wasn't going well. The baby is still young, so I'm letting you all stay here for now. You can leave whenever you want, okay? I told David, who fell silent at my words. A week later, they found a construction company, but all they could afford was a small prefabricated hut. I don't expect Julia to keep it clean, so even a small house should be fine. I told the couple who were preparing to move. You'll need to decide on daycare, so until you're settled, I can take care of the baby. You both should become independent as parents first. You're taking our child, you monster, Julia exclaimed angrily, but David stopped her. With just my earnings, it's impossible to support the two of them. Let's leave our baby here until things settle. No way, I'll divorce you then, Julia threatened. Even if you do, you still won't have a home, I interjected calmly. It seemed David was finally facing reality, desperately trying to convince the furious Julia. Then don't make it come to that, I said. I didn't say I'd take her away. If you can, take her with you. When I snorted and said this, Julia bit her lip in frustration and quieted down. She must have realized that she had no choice but to temporarily part with her baby. Afterward, the couple quietly packed their things and left. I did feel sorry for the baby. However, having parents like that might not make much difference. Of course, if they changed their ways, it would be best for the baby to be raised by her own parents. But I couldn't help but think that the baby might be happier being raised by Ashley and me. David and Julia, who moved to their new land, contacted us almost every day. If it was about the granddaughter, I was happy to reply. But all they ever asked for was money. When ignored, they sent pictures of bread for dinner. Seeing this, Ashley laughed. Even if they ruin their health, they won't be able to afford medical bills. In the countryside, a car is essential, I commented. They're currently driving a used car they bought for $3,000, which frequently stalls. They might be saying this to gain our sympathy, but they don't know it's just a laughing matter for us, Ashley added. In this situation, they probably won't be able to take their daughter back, I concluded. But as long as we can live with our adorable granddaughter, I think it's okay. When she turned 3, she was very cute, kind, and nothing like David or Julia. She was a hard worker. Ashley bought her a number puzzle, and she eagerly learned numbers and could already read letters. David and Julia are still living day by day, Ashley observed. Occasionally, when they receive pictures of their daughter, they exclaim, "Super cute," as if looking at a stuffed toy. It still seems impossible for the two of them to become parents, I mused. When the granddaughter grows up, I hope she can learn from her parents' mistakes and grow up straight. That's what I think.